Sure, everybody. And I'm very pleased that Prashanti's here because it's all her fault that she actually got me involved with composting. Um, so this is probably even this is a poster that I loved about Compost Co right from the start. Was I guess this drawing. It was quite a simplified drawing of what actually composting was about, which was collecting food scraps, composting them, turning it into nutrient-rich compost, turning that into food, and going through the whole cycle. And and that's probably best represented on the island at Tomotu restaurant, where they do have a garden there for the restaurant, and that was really the site that I joined Compost Co was on Tomotu's site, and they were fully supportive of it, and didn't really want any rent for the project. However, what we needed to do was supply them with compost so that they could develop their garden and do the whole garden to table cycle and invest in the circular economy. So I guess everything starts with a bit of history, and this was the best history that I could sort of come up with. As I understand it, the project started in 2018 with the Surfdale Food to Soil project, which was composting food waste for 172 households. And that was originated with Homegrown Waiheke Trust, and they received funding from Auckland Council. So they were pretty much the pioneers on the island, I guess, trialing, picking up household food scraps and composting it, and I guess providing the compost back to the community. However, as I understand it, the funding dried up, and then the Waiheke Resources Trust became involved with it. And they also received some grant for some infrastructure. And basically, when I joined in around the end of 2020, I think it was, and as we probably all forgotten, but it's not that far ago. It was sort of in the middle of the whole COVID era. And so the project was at the Tomotu site. Um, and Basically, the Prashanti decided that she was going down to, and I joined, and Prashanti decided she was going down to Nelson, and I had the opportunity to take over the project, and I was pretty new on the island, and I was looking to do something a little bit different, and so I got involved with it. The funding all ended. Um, Basically, I was pretty new to the whole I guess picture of what actually happens with a project like this, and I didn't quite understand what happens when projects become unfunded. The Waiheke Resources Trust sort of continued on with it. The project was losing money. Um, yeah, Mike Mars came to me and sort of said, "Look, we've sort of managed to get some funding from some different sources to keep it going." Um, I think they got a lotto grant and all sorts of things like that. So he basically sort of said, look, we need to do something about the project and it needs some changes. So that was pretty much sort of where my journey sort of started. I'd sort of had a year and a bit sort of working through the project, and we needed to do something else to get it going and to continue the project on. So I can't quite see the heading up there. Okay, so do you want me to move it? Yeah, can you move it? Thanks. Oh, great. Okay, so basically, we needed a project reset. So we took what was working. So the messaging was good. Stop throwing food waste into landfill. It was not a complicated message, and the people that we were dealing with and or wanting to deal with sort of understood that. Not only that is when I took the project over from Prashanti, they pivoted from residential food collection to more commercial food collection, that was successful. They had around 20 paying customers. There was three waste streams: compostable packaging, food waste collection, and oyster shell collection. Um, half of those paying customers probably we were dealing with were giving us compostable packaging. It had good local community support, and you know, it was supported by the local board as much as what they could do, and it was supported by the business community. And gardeners loved the product, and so the goodwill was high with the project, and that's always a benefit, sort of, if you're wanting to do something, is if you've got goodwill with the community at large. And we had a good site location at Tamotu. There was no charge. It was reasonably isolated yet central to the businesses in the community, and I found it an interesting project. I was learning quite a bit about different things and how could we actually make it work. Okay, so some of the things that we need to look at, what needed rethinking, was the compostable packaging processing. It was I was joined one summer by Richard Wallace. We were a bit short of people, and I needed a hand because everyone had sort of disappeared over summer, and we have quite a seasonal component to the project. So Richard came over. We've been toying with the idea of what to do with compostables. We need to take some hours out of the project or redivert those hours into things that were probably going to be more beneficial to the project. It was time-consuming sorting compostable packaging from rubbish. It was dirty work. The sorting was not popular with volunteers or staff. There was a lot of double processing. The packaging had to be sorted and then mulched up so that it could be added to the compost. And it was difficult to see, once you started to investigate, how many hours and the amount of money that we were getting from the bin collection of compostables was actually adding to the quality of the compost. So the question was why we were going to do it. So to give you an example, we'd have some nice volunteers come to help us, and we'd pick up the compostable packaging, and we were getting a lot of contaminated product, as you can sort of see there, and we had to sort of sort through that. I would talk to some of the customers, and they weren't that keen in actually taking control of the bin and making sure that it wasn't being used as a general rubbish bin. So we'd have to sort that out, and we're getting food waste in it, and we'd have to sort that out. Then we were sorting it. We'd have to take out all the polystyrene lids from it. So because if that got mulched up into the compostable packaging, it just continued on right through the whole composting project. So we were sorting it into cups and PLA cups and plates and putting that all through, and then we'd mulch it up, and this is what we were adding to the compost once it was all mulched up. And really, it was kind of like we weren't getting great results from what we were doing. We're adding that to the compost. It didn't look quite what we wanted to do. We had to turn it a couple of times. We were finding a lot of the packaging was actually drying out the compost, and so we'd have to continue with that. And so we decided, okay, so what that was one thing that we needed to look at. What else needed improving? We needed to make more high quality compost that was readily available. People love the product, and but we needed to make it more available than what we were currently doing. We needed to sell the crushed oyster shell. We were picking up oyster shells mainly from the oyster inn, and we'd just throw that through the mulcher and it'd be ready to go. It was actually being used as a landscaping project, so it was a good revenue gatherer if we could get it out the door. It didn't need a lot of processing time. We needed to stop wasting time turning compost bins endlessly to break down the compost in packaging. So in other words, we wanted to try and speed up the time that it took to break down the food waste before it was no longer attractive to, I guess, rodents, and we could store it somewhere and let it mature and turn into compost. We wanted to utilize the carbon cycle bins more efficiently to process more food waste. And we wanted to concentrate on food waste and oyster shell customers. And the other thing is too, is we wanted to listen to what our customers wanted. So they wanted the compost available. And there was no point in making the compost if we couldn't actually sell it for some revenue to keep the project going. So we needed to sort of find a way of actually supplying that. So what did we do? We doubled down on hospitality. Some of these customers have been on with us since the get-go. We had good support from Panichi and the Oyster Inn. We've got some new customers, quite large customers, the Heki, Arcadia. We've got around about 20 to 25 just pretty much food waste customers now. So we had to replace our compostable packaging customers and get a revenue stream from more food waste customers, and we were able to do that. We changed the bag size from a 40-litre bag to a 20-litre bag. The bags on the left-hand side there are the original 40-litre bag. I made the mistake of not knowing how much was actually going into the bag. I understood sort of these lines here that you can sort of see was either that was 30 litres or 40 litres. When we would fill up the bag, and what would actually happen is the bag would swell, and we weren't measuring it in any shape or form. It sort of sounds, and so once we sort of, rather than that, we actually used a 20-litre bucket to measure it in there, and that sort of changed things around. We were also finding when we brought the compost back, the little old ladies will come up and want to buy a bag of compost, and they couldn't actually lift it into the back of their car to actually take home, because the amount of compost that we were putting in was quite heavy. It probably only weighed around about 30 kilos. So it was just a sort of a simple thing where we came up with our new bag, which is used both for the crushed oyster shell or the nutrient-dense compost, and downgraded the size of it so that it could be handled by most people that wanted to do it. Its access on Waiheke is not very good, so having a smaller bag allowed people to sort of carry it up to out or down their stairs and put it into their garden. So we changed the carbon cycle bin layout. The original site, we used that on the left-hand side, as we used a zigzag system where we were putting the compost from one bin to the other. We'd done some experimenting, and with smaller bin sizes, and now that we weren't taking the compostable packaging, what could we do? How long would we need to leave it in a bin before we turned it? How quickly would we need to turn it? And we changed from a 6-bin system to a 4-bin system. And this is the set of bins that we set up at Tanotu down by their restaurant area. So we went to this 4-bin system. And then, so we did all that. We changed everything around. We had a lot more mulch on site. And as you can sort of see on the right-hand side there, we did make a big mess. We had a lot of storage areas that we started to build over here, because we were turning it through the bins a lot quicker. We could get away with actually turning it 3 times, and it was in the bin system for 8 weeks. We broke up this 12 bins into 3 lots of 4 bins, so each one was a batch system, so that gave us 50% more capacity to actually process food waste, which we needed to do because we were handling a lot more food waste. So basically sort of like we just sort of turned everything upside down over a period of time. So what actually happened when we did that? So, well, the compost improved without the packaging, and you can sort of see the compost on the left there, and it's got lots of mycelium in it, and it looks a completely different colour. We weren't having to, and that was pretty much after 8 to 9 weeks in the bin system, so we weren't having to go back in, add some more mulch, add some more water. all those sorts of things, and turn it a couple more times to try and break down the compostable packaging that was in there. Our waste collection, can't get that on there, how do I get that up? Increased, so that first year, sort of after, I guess when COVID was sort of dropped off and all the rest of it, so we did around about 16 tonnes of food waste. That continued through as we sort of concentrated and left our compostable packaging behind. By 2023, we're doing 32 tonnes. 2024, 43 tonnes of food waste, and last year there was a reason for that. We sort of didn't go and look for a lot more customers last year, but we sort of peaked at around that 40 tonne level of food waste. And it's the same with the oyster shell. We were starting to, we changed the bag size from quite a large bag down to a 15-litre bag, and we managed to pick up Te Ratuka oysters, which is an oyster farm processing plant on the island. So we had more oysters that we could actually brush up and sell in bags as well. Our sales increased. 2024 we did about 400 bags of compost. In 2025 we did around 800 bags of compost, and shell sales all started to increase as well. We started to put the crushed oyster shell, because of some changes and people wanted oysters, they wanted shell, but you can't just go down to the beach now and pick up a whole lot of shells from the beach. So there's actually a shortage of that particular product on the island. So we're sort of filling a bit of a gap where people are building all sorts of things, pathways. We're using it as a landscaping product, and petanque courts and various different things. So we're starting to grow a market that we're actually selling the oyster shell. And like I said, it didn't take us long to actually process the oyster shell. It's pretty much pick it up, let it clean out a little bit, and then throw it through the mulcher, and then we can bag it up and sell it. The compost, we're talking around about 6 to 8 months before it's actually ready for sale. And we also got a WMF grant for $50,000 in 2024, which we thought that's great. We can tidy up the infrastructure that we had at Te Motu, put in some purpose-built storage bins, help with the drainage in the area, and make it not, cover the area so that it was, I guess, a lot more palatable, from the fact that we were doing quite a lot of volume there now, and it wasn't a bit of an eyesore for guests that were coming up to Te Motu to go to their nice restaurant there. However, things never stop changing. So unfortunately, Te Motu, the site that we were on, Te Motu wanted to sell the section in 2025, just a couple of months after we actually got the funding, and they didn't want to get out of it completely, but so we were able to put a couple of 2 sets of carbon cycle bins, which would be 8 bins, down by the garden area, backing onto their garden. We did a trial, and they felt comfortable that we were going to, there wasn't going to be too much odours for the restaurant guests, because it is pretty close to the actual restaurant. However, we needed to get off the main site, and we needed to find another home for around 12 other carbon cycle bins, because as part of the WMF budget, we bought another 4 carbon cycle bins, so we were up to 20 carbon cycle bins for processing food. So we needed to find this new home. We needed to continue processing all the food waste and shell, and unfortunately it wasn't a straightforward job in actually finding a site to actually transfer the majority of the carbon cycle bins to. and it took longer than we wanted to. We moved off as much as possible from our old site. However, that caused inefficiencies in the fact that we weren't storing mulch there anymore, and we weren't processing any food waste there. And the summer peak was coming upon us, and we were handling a lot more food waste previously than before as well. So unfortunately, we sort of just had to do the best we could, but our labour costs fell out because we were just running around the place and having to transfer stuff from one place to another. We used the high schools. They had a set of full carbon cycle bins at their high school. We were able to use them. They weren't being used. However, the Wimouth grant in 2024, we were finally able to upgrade our infrastructure, and we found some new homes. So the compost story is to be continued. And we were fortunate with the Wimouth grant that they were quite open. We told them what the situation was. Normally you have to use those funds in a 12-month period. They allowed us to keep on kicking it down the road until we found another facility, and we were able to at least hang on to those funds, and they worked with us until we actually found a new site. So this is Prashant might recognise this. This is the back of this is our storage area after we've finished putting our processing the food waste. We transfer it out of the carbon cycle bins and store it in these areas here. So we sort of made it a feature of the back of the garden. They were looking for a windbreak, so it sort of fitted into the garden. We placed a set of 4 compost bins at each side of that storage area, and if we plan it correctly, we can sort of go there, spend 2 or 3 weeks on that site processing the food waste and emptying it out or bagging it up. So we're not transporting all the time. We just need to transport enough mulch to actually handle what our food load that we need for a week or two as we fill up the bins. In the height of summer, we'll fill up 2 carbon cycle bins a week. So it doesn't take long to fill up 8 carbon cycle bins and still leave a gap to actually turn the bins. So we sort of went from, you can see in the past, so we sort of tidy up this area. So it did look a lot better than what we actually were doing. And then this is our new site where at the dirt track, Kristen came in with a Hail Mary at the end. We had one site we were going to, and unfortunately at the last minute they said we couldn't go there. And Kristen had a contact down at the dirt track, and they were quite accommodating. They gave us a small area down the back there that we could build some more storage areas. We can put our mulch there. You can sort of see up the back in this area here. This is 3 sets of carbon cycle bins, or 4 up the back of the area there, and it's a nice shaded area. And we've really only been in that area since we fully transferred there in March of this year, so it's pretty fresh. And what have been my key takeaways with this project? Well, things will always change, and they have quite a lot. The project has to serve multiple purposes. So the customers were an important part of this project, which were the people coming to buy the compost and the shell, and we had to get them into the habit of coming here to buy their compost and buy their shell, because they've got other places that they can go to, because there is no point in us making a whole heap of compost and spending all the labour on doing that if we can't actually just, I guess, have a purpose for that compost at the end. We needed to work with businesses. We left the compostable packaging businesses and said we couldn't do that anymore. However, there were other projects that were happening on the island with the Keep Cup, and it was going away from just a single-use cup in investigating using a reusable cup. So us continuing to compostable packaging probably wasn't incentivizing any businesses to actually look at doing somewhere anything different. And you know, we need to work with the WRT. There was good support from the WRT, but if they're not getting any funding for the project, it's hard for them to continue a project just on their own, unless there sort of is some way of actually making the project work for itself. Although also, I mean, we were pretty happy when we got the grant. We thought, you know, that solved a lot of problems. However, it's really only for infrastructure, so it's good that we've invested in some more infrastructure. However, it won't, not necessarily getting any money for any wages or anything like that. So it just, if you're going to bring the infrastructure in to actually scale up the business, then there's going to be more labour involved with it, and somehow that's got to get funded. And we really looked at it as there was a crisis there, and it was an opportunity for us to make improvements in it. So that's kind of been my experience with the project today.